What you're experiencing on screen is deeply a mystery in a lot of different ways, actually. The folks even that are sort of the stalwart narrator or the adventurer investigator are probably having their own battle of confidence within their soul at that very moment anyway.
Most of our listeners will remember Jim Perry as our official paranormal correspondent, as well as the host of the podcast Euphomet, a documentary series that explores the unknown and our relationship to it through talking with those who believe they've experienced the supernatural. Joining us is the host of the podcast, Stories with Sapphire Sandalo, a queer Filipino-American occultist whose mission is to add more empathy and diversity to supernatural communities through stories and interviews from around the world. You may have seen her on the Max show Ghost Town Terror, investigating a haunting, or as an expert on the Travel Channel's Paranormal Caught On Camera and Paranormal Nightshift. Today we'll be talking about what it's like to work on very different kinds of projects in the supernatural sphere and get a behind-the-scenes look at how they're made. You know, those classic reality TV shows where experiencers tell their stories complete with reenactments, and those dramatic, shaky camera ghost hunts that seek to prove the existence of these unseen forces. Jim and Sapphire compare this kind of work done for big production companies to the work that they have more control over, where they seek, first and foremost, to create spaces of safety and empathy for those who believe they've experienced the unexplainable. We'll talk about the dream of diversifying away from the formulaic industry of ghost bros and Christian-influenced exorcistic endings to allow the paranormal to take different forms, understood in different ways by very different kinds of people. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am thrilled to invite two of my ghostly, freaky buddies, people I've worked with or known throughout my career podcasting. And it's like so fun to have both of you, Sapphire and Jim, in one place together. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is great. I wouldn't miss it for anything.
Wow.
I mean, you could pay me so much money, I'd be like, no, I'm gonna do this conversation.
You're a loyal friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I have for a long time wanted to find some way to talk about one of my great loves, which is the paranormal television show or kind of the paranormal entertainment industry at large, because I grew up watching these, of course. I still really enjoy a good paranormal reenactment, as bad as they often are. I find a lot of joy in that particular part. So I just wanted to talk to you both as people who've been in the paranormal industry, in ghost shows, behind the scenes. I'm calling them ghost shows, which is probably the wrong term, but we'll get into that.
No, it's accurate.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Good. Yeah.
Well, you both have a lot of experience in this realm. So just to get us going, I would love to hear about both of your experiences growing up with this type of show or radio or whatever you'd like, whatever really got you into the mindset of the paranormal.
This is such a cool question because it allows me to completely geek out on the foundational elements, I think, of my entire experience with the paranormal. I was a sleepless kid.
Oh.
I was just too wired. I think undiagnosed ADD or something. Mm-hmm. And essentially I was listening to a lot of just FM and AM radio at the time as a kid because I just could not. It started with like Mariners games or something, I think. And then like 90s pop. There's just so many songs from that catalog, that era of music that's like burned into my head, like Seal songs and stuff like that I just know all the words to. And I really, I shouldn't seemingly, and then one curious midnight flipping through like the stations, like turning the old school dial through the static, I discovered a voice from Pahrump, Nevada. And that voice was of Art Bell. And I began listening to that show every single night. It challenged my perspective on so many different things. It introduced me to so many ideas. Now, as an adult and an experiencer of sorts, and also an enthusiast of the researchers and stories and everything that was foundational to that program, I understand that not all of it was 100% accurate or legitimate. But, I think that like sort of nighttime vibe, the staticky AM radio waves, his choice of music, the tone of his voice, the types of guests and experiences explored, it shaped me in a way like more than probably any other media form will ever shape me in my life. And that was my introduction into the space in a real way, aside from sort of family experiences and a lineage of kind of weird psychic phenomena and things of that nature. It was Art Bell that tied a lot of those things together for me and probably created me into a podcaster, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. What about you, Sapphire? What's like do you have kind of that particular thing that got you into the paranormal?
Oh, my goodness. So my first exposure just to the paranormal and ghosts in general was through my family, the stories that they told me. It seemed like every week someone in my family had something new happen to them, and it was just very normal. Like I just remember like my cousins, they lived in this like really, really haunted apartment that I like hated being in. And it felt like every other week they'd be like, oh yeah, like this thing happened. And so just hearing it straight from the source, from people that I knew and trusted, that made me believe in it even more as a child. And then growing up, I started hearing stories from other people and realized, oh, so this expands beyond my family. This is universal. There's other people who experience similar things. And we loved watching shows like, oh God, I'm going to forget the name. Was it called Fact or Fiction? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction.
Beyond Belief. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
My partner and I did an entire rewatch of Beyond Belief. So It's like in my bones right now. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That was like a #1 show for like me and my family. We were obsessed, especially with like all the paranormal stories. There's ones that like are still just like ingrained in my brain. Like, did you watch the episode where they find a ring because it like a candle melts on top of a stove?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay.
I think I do. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So shows like that. What's the other one? Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen, there's an anime called Pet Shop of Horrors. Do you know what that is?
No, never heard of it.
I don't know either.
Oh my goodness. It's only like a couple episodes. It's kind of hard to find because it's not streaming anywhere. But that definitely shaped my story sensibilities. Basically, it's about this guy who owns a pet shop downtown, and people come to him to like get... Oh God, I can't even like describe it, but like there's like a moral to each thing and it's really scary. Anyways, but that also shaped my love for ghost stories and paranormal storytelling.
Yeah, I think your kind of origin story is pretty similar to mine. And I have talked on both of your shows at different points and on my own show about, I had so many weird paranormal experiences growing up. So did my family. It was very normal for us to bring our weird stories to each other and to also enjoy a lot of paranormal television, especially Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction. That was certainly my favorite. And Unsolved Mysteries. I love all of it.
Yes.
And so I'm curious because for me, when we're talking about paranormal shows, there's this split between kind of the two types. There's the ones where people are telling their stories and they're being reenacted. And then there's the one where people are going out and actually hunting for paranormal stories. And I think both of your shows kind of toe the line. Both of your podcasts as well kind of toe the line between those two types. Like you're seeking those types of answers, but you're also allowing people to tell their stories. So I'm interested in like what your relationships are to those two different types of shows and whether you like one more than the other, whether you have more fun with one over the other.
Well, I think what's interesting is that when these stories are transported into certain mediums, there is like sort of a demand for resolution to be found or for things to be, sort of tied into a little tight bow for you. But as it happens with the phenomenon, seemingly it does everything it can to just keep the mystery going. Even when you think you've discovered something, what you've discovered is 100 more questions instead of there being real definitive answers. And so, like, in terms of format, I think for me, either types of those shows that you mentioned or those formats, I think like just approaching it from an authentic space of curiosity and not placing too much judgment on things. Now, obviously, like there are things that are firmly placed in objective reality that all of us can agree upon. And I think that's a good starting space. And that also provides a little levity to these stories so we don't get too far removed and that there's a relatability to these things. And honestly, I've found that as long as I keep it human-centric, I'm able to find that really easily because we're just a bunch of apes that don't know what's going on and have feelings about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have actually been on both types of those shows.
Yeah.
One is Paranormal Nightshift. So that one is people telling their stories. There's a reenactment, and then they intercut it with an expert to talk about what's going on in the story. And then the other one is I have gone out investigating in Montana for the Ghost Town Terror. Two very completely different experiences.
Yeah, I bet.
But Paranormal Nightshift, there's a lot less, I guess, pressure with that because it's somebody telling a story that's already happened. And so you can sort of just look back on it and analyze like from what we know, but also knowing that you'll never really figure out what's going on because we can't return to the scene and recreate what happened. So in a way, it's like a little less satisfying, but not like a lot of pressure. Whereas with Ghost Town Terror, everything is happening in real time and there's things going on behind the scenes as well as on camera that's like adding to the stress. But obviously you only see what makes it into the hour-long cut. So yeah, I mean, if I had to choose, I prefer just sitting in a studio talking about something that already happened. It's a lot less pressure.
Well, and you don't have to prove anything, right? Or not that you would necessarily be able to prove something, but in Ghost Town Terror, you are embedded with a family in what is a very cool location. I mean, when I saw the shots of the town that you were in, I was like, what a dream. But it also seems very scary. So yeah. And then, of course, I have also seen you, as I mentioned before we started recording, like when my partner and I are in hotels and we're flipping through the channels, sometimes it'll be, oh, there's Sapphire talking about the paranormal. And it's like so exciting. And I'm curious just to follow up on that. Like, how is it for you? Because I know, as for both of you, that you very much entertain the paranormal and hold certain beliefs, but you're also very grounded in those beliefs and are interested in both sides, like the skeptical side and the believing side, the side that, there is more than we can see. And I think I fall into that with both of you. And I'm curious, Sapphire, first, like, what is it like for you to bring that kind of, like, to bring your own personality to a show like that, where you're also asked to very much believe in what you're talking about?
What a great question. Thank you. So it's honestly kind of frustrating because TV needs everything to be very visible and big and obvious, right? Like as a viewer, you want things to be very spelled out and like they want to see what you're talking about. They don't want to hear you, talk about something that you like felt or like heard if it wasn't caught on camera, which makes things very frustrating because a lot of the way that I feel like energy and see things, it's like all with my body, within my head. And it just doesn't make good TV. But yeah, so as much as I try to bring logic and rationale and question things, sometimes you'll be seen as like not playing along or being a good team player. So when you're on a show like that, the number one thing you're concerned with is being entertaining. And sometimes questioning everything is not entertaining. So
Definitely. And not the vibe, let's say.
Yes, exactly. You're right. It's not the vibe they're going for. So
Totally. What about you, Jim? Because I know you haven't been necessarily a correspondent in a TV show, but you have done a lot of radio stuff. And I'm wondering if you felt that same kind of maybe pressure to present a certain type of belief or to buy into something fully where maybe you don't actually feel that way completely.
I think there's always a pressure that is there. I think it exists for a lot of creators in general, no matter what medium you're a part of. I think that you're dealing with whatever your experience is, put in contrast sometimes to what the beliefs or the agenda is of other groups. And sometimes those other groups are like sort of the entertainment industrial complex. Sometimes they're like sort of cult-like behavior from figureheads within the space. I'm talking about paranormal in general with that. And there's a lot of things that we're requested to buy into or believe, right? And if you're not believing in that, or if you're pushing back on that, or if you're just posing questions, sometimes it can lead to like a little bit of ostracization from certain communities, maybe. And so I think that's probably how I have faced that, or when those things have become clear to me, it's been because I've been in opposition to surrendering curiosity. And that can occur at a lot of different levels. Like, TV stuff is really interesting because it is very hard to get a show on the air that maybe fits with my own sensibilities or drive for what I feel I want to share in a medium like that. There's a lot of compromises that you have to make to put a show up like that. And, in my history of working those elements with really great people and really great partners, you find that you really love podcasting a lot. Because your ability within spaces like that are more controllable, more ownable, less averse to risk, you're sort of less challenged by those factors that you're talking about. It's not about like sort of authenticity or integrity necessarily. It's about like just the perspective and what you're trying to do as like a creator or a voice, a researcher, whatever that is, because it's just different ways to touch people. It's different ways to interact with them. I'm a big admirer of a lot of folks like Sapphire who are on programs that reach out to a completely different audience than necessarily our podcasts do. So I appreciate the people that can do it, that can nail it. And I think it's a very important form of communication of these topics.
Definitely. And I think, you bring up like an interesting point of how, you both have podcasts that you get to have creative control over. Whereas maybe when you're a part of a bigger project out of a bigger studio, you're going to have to make a lot of compromises, I guess, or maybe you're not going to express your full beliefs or truth or whatever. So I know that both of you, though, really value telling people's stories, helping people tell their stories. And part of the reason I know that you both do this is because you believe that these stories are important and that the people that are having these experiences, whatever they are, whether they are truly paranormal or whether they're a mental experience, which I don't know if you can even differentiate those. But so what's the biggest difference that you experience when you have that creative control over these types of paranormal stories that are being told?
Well, for me, just the fact that in podcasts and YouTube, there's no gatekeeper. You've already said this, but when you're working on a show, there's a lot of other layers of approval that need to happen. And again, it can get a little frustrating, but then you just have to get a little bit more creative about how you want to tell your story. But for me, I don't think I could ever abandon the podcast if I were to somehow like just switch mediums, because I like having that. Like I feel like the podcast, at least, I can remain true to myself and help other people tell their story in an honest way without having to change anything or sensationalize anything. And like just so that exists. And then everything else, I'm still like trying to play the game so that, I mean, Jim, like you said, it's hard to get something off the ground that feels so truly you, especially when there are so many hoops that you have to go through. But unfortunately, it's like you gotta just kind of jump through a couple of hoops and then be like, okay, just kidding. This is actually what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
For sure. More after this. And now, back to the show. You tell on your show very different stories than are usually told. I think that you find people that wouldn't necessarily be the types of people who would go on these shows. Do you think that, do you find that to be true? Like it's a kind of a different type of person who's telling their story?
I mean, I pride myself in creating a space that people feel safe enough to share their stories. I get a lot of emails from people who say, I usually don't email shows and I usually don't talk about this publicly, but I feel like you would bring integrity to the story and keep it honest. So that's sort of the vibe that I'm going for. And I think that's really important. And I think with a TV show, I mean, I know this for a fact, like producers will just edit it to work for TV. You know, you need certain beats to hit. It's not necessarily not true. It's just they're trying to make it good for a viewer.
What about you, Jim? I know that though you aren't part of a TV show, you do have a similar experience of speaking with people who I think also wouldn't necessarily be a part of these ghost shows. Like, I feel like you also find very different types of people.
What Sapphire is saying resonates with me completely. It's probably why we're all friends, right? Like, it's important for us that people can feel like they trust us and that they do trust us and that we respect their stories and experiences, right? I think at the end of the day, a lot of people are tuning into all three of our shows because it might make them feel less alone in very strange times and very strange circumstances. And I hold that personally with a lot of responsibility to honor that. And I think that attracts maybe individuals who would in other circumstances rather not share their story publicly. I've had folks, request to be anonymous and stayed that way all throughout the process. And then afterwards, I'm able to share with them how many people connected over their story and how many people thanked them for sharing their story and being brave enough to be public about things. And it gives that person like a great amount of validation, I think, in what their experience of it, their quality of feelings around these things that happen. And so, we're just really lucky to share a lot of people's story for the first time, like stuff that, hey, listen, I never tell anybody this, but I feel like I can trust you to tell you this. And, everybody likes that experience when somebody wants to tell you a secret that they don't want to tell anybody else. Yeah, that's incredible. You feel so validated as someone that people can trust.
Oh, yeah. And that's like a really interesting thing too, is like someone coming to you and asking to be anonymous, because there's something about that lends an air of credibility where it's like, okay, you're not getting on TV, you're not getting money out of this. You really just, you find this to be so important to yourself and important potentially to understanding the world and what the unseen, that you're willing to do this without getting anything in return. But that leads me to the question, and maybe you both don't know this, but maybe you do. I'm very curious about how the people who appear on these shows telling their stories, or the groups of people, how are they sourced? Is there like something that people put out and ask for paranormal stories, or are there people kind of scouring the internet looking for people who are already talking about their stories? I've always wondered about how those people are actually reached by these networks.
Well, I know that for Paranormal Nightshift, they did a call like on Craigslist or websites like that, where they were like, if you have a story, just email it and then we'll fly you into Canada. Actually, what was kind of cool for that, though, is that I had received an email from a previous show that I did of someone whose story would fit. And then they flew her out to Canada to like be in the show. So that made me really happy knowing that like that story at least is, I think, real.
Oh, very cool. I mean, I'm like thinking of a show, like I can't remember which one it was, but a ghost show that my partner Miranda and I were watching. You know, every time I find a new ghost show in which people are telling their stories and there are fantastic, in quotes, reenactments, that's really our jam. And it was like a few months ago we were watching one and the story was like, oh, you just watched the movie It. And you're like, and then when I was a child, a clown crashed its car and it's been following me forever. And you're like,
oh my God.
I don't know.
Wow. That's a good one.
I don't know. I feel pretty confident when I'm watching one of those shows where I'm like, you're bullshitting. You just wanted to be on this show versus, oh, you had something happen and you are truly disturbed or you are truly affected by this story. So I just, I don't know exactly what my question is.
Right. Well, like, I think what you're revealing is like, that's kind of like a hot topic in paranormal television creation, and that the sourcing of stories is sometimes highly debatable in terms of where source material actually originates from. And, you know, being someone myself that in the early days of doing Euphomet, and this was 10 years ago or more, I would be hit up all the time by production companies that wanted involvement. And what they really wanted were just all of your contacts and stories and then nothing else to do with you. So the amount of shows that you can go on Discovery Plus right now. And, oh yeah, I talk with them as a young cub, you know, paranormal enthusiast and see like the contacts and the stories and stuff that I gave them just used with zero credit.
Wow.
Like that shit still happens and it's incredibly immoral. It's incredibly predatory. And it's one of the things that kind of I've been battling against since being, you know, more involved in this field and more senior in this field, for when investigators or producers or content creators ask my opinion on whether they should just give a production company or a producer all of their ideas for nothing.
Yeah.
So that's how a lot of that happens.
Okay. All right.
Jim, we've talked about this before, like without naming names, but I think that's what makes it extra, I guess I say frustrating a lot, I've noticed. I was trying to pick a different word.
Hey, well,
but it is.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, right.
What makes it extra frustrating is like what we talked about before, how we are very, very careful and thoughtful about the stories we share and the people who come to us, like making sure that they feel safe. And it is kind of just a slap in the face when these companies contact you and are like, hey, can you like connect us with these people? Like they use our podcasts as sources for their own show. And there's nothing technically illegal because like I don't own these people's stories, but it definitely feels icky when like bigger companies that have more resources and more money use other smaller independent shows to basically do the work for them. You know, like, I don't know, that's kind of icky to me.
Absolutely. And also these people who've like placed their trust in you as well and like handing them over to, I don't know, people I imagine won't handle them with the same level of care and respect. Would that be right?
Yeah. But and then they also have the right to, you know, say no to these people that are approaching. But it's just the fact that they're even doing that just feels really gross. It's like you don't really get what this is, you know, like this isn't just someone's story that you're just going to put onto your show. Like it's more than that. Like we've built communities around this. And it's just really obvious that like they just don't get it.
Well said.
Oh, totally. If you could both see some big changes in the paranormal industrial complex, in, you know, paranormal entertainment, if you had control, if you were some sort of godlike figure, how would you both like to change kind of what we generally see as popular?
Ooh.
Wow. That's like if you can have 3 wishes type of question. In a way.
And you can't wish for more wishes.
Right. No, damn it.
Yeah.
Nice try.
Can one of us wish for other wishes for the other one?
Ooh.
Loophole.
I like that loophole. Yes.
Chelsey, this is a like super interesting question, and I think it gets down to like intention, right? And there's a lot of things that I think has potential on film and television, and we see it sometimes, but I would like for the material just to be treated more seriously and also more creatively. Like, there's a space where this stuff, it just gets so much weirder than what we see, and not all like demons and dark either. We know that there's a certain quotient of that type of energy that exists, right? I think like Sapphire's show is a good example of like some of the scary parts of these phenomena. There's also just like a lot of weird fun stuff about the phenomenon. There's a playfulness, there's a mystery, there's a lot of history, right? This stuff affects us as not just individuals, but as societies. It influences culture, music, and art. There's so much more to the phenomenon. I feel like we're like in that stage of like cooking shows when they only thought that they could do like a cooking demonstration. That was the only TV you could have. It's like we're there with paranormal content. And they don't understand there's all these other things you can do with it, So that's what my hope is that there's an injection of creativity, there's risk-taking, there's authentic stories told, and with integrity.
And the mold is maybe broken a little bit because it has become very formulaic, right? I think it's like pretty, and I love that point that you bring up because, of course, I think of when you and I were doing Euphomet stuff and we met the Bigfoot hunter and how connected he was to his story of what Bigfoot was as a paranormal being and how deep and like in his heart and soul that was. And, it wasn't necessarily a scary story. It wasn't like these shows you see with the intense music and the reenactments where there's something chasing you. It was like it mattered to him emotionally more than it had actually like frightened him.
Yeah.
Jim, I agreed with like everything that you mentioned. So double that. Oh, shoot. What was the question? Oh, what would I change if I was God? Got it.
I like that. That's going to happen with Sapphire. She's going to get the ability granted to her. Like, Sapphire, you're God.
I hope.
And then she's going to think about something else and then be like, shit, I forgot I'm God.
So, okay. Paranormal TV. First of all, I want to make a disclaimer. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm ungrateful for all the opportunities I have. I think it's fair to make like criticisms about the industry, but I have truly enjoyed all of the shows that I've been on. What I do find a little bit frustrating, my favorite word. I feel like paranormal TV as it exists, it definitely has a place. Otherwise, it wouldn't. Like, it's definitely entertaining and fun and, it's like good hotel room entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it has its place for sure. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so popular. But I just think that there needs to be more options because now what's happening, something that I'm observing is that people see these shows and they use exclusively these shows to form their opinions about the spirit world, about the paranormal. And that scares me because it only tells like a small sliver of what magic and spirituality truly is.
Yeah.
And, when you have a very homogenous looking slate of investigators, you're only getting a very, very small perspective. Because the thing about ghost hunting and paranormal investigating, depending on the investigator, you're going to get different stuff. If you're going into a place that's filled with spirits who I'll just be real. Like, if they're indigenous spirits who don't want to talk to white people, they're not going to do anything, or they're going to do something really, really harmful because they want you to, like, get the fuck out.
Get the fuck out of here. Yeah.
So it varies. And then sometimes you might get evidence where you can't speak the language that is coming up on the EVP. So it's like another reason why we need more diversity and different types of people investigating, different types of places and stories being told. Because like, I feel like we've gotten to a point where all of these shows are just visiting the same places.
Yep.
So yeah, if I could change something, I want more different types of investigators doing stuff that other people haven't done. I also want to see just more like occultism and magic used in it. Because like when you work with magic and energies, like it's a very different experience than just going into a place and receiving and experiencing things. It's very, very different. And I don't know, I want more people to see that side.
Yeah.
Because that's like the real shit, in my opinion.
Oh, yes.
It's so well said.
You're so right, because I feel like the formula not only is repetitive in its form, but it's like, all right, let's get the fucking priest in here now. It's like the very end is like oftentimes like, okay, we've got to cleanse this house with the priest. We've got to have an exorcism, and maybe you'll get a psychic. Maybe you'll get a pretty kind of painfully cliche Native American who will come in like at most at the end to kind of cleanse it. And it feels, it never feels good necessarily how it wraps up. And I feel like that's something I'd love is like, maybe we don't need to like banish this poltergeist using a cross and holy water. Like it's a very strange thing we've fallen into, which of course relates so much to American hysteria and the satanic panic that kind of remains to this day. It's like that is threaded through it. And I agree that I feel dark energies. I've had weird experiences like that, but I would also love to see that kind of come through something other than a weird like Catholic Judeo-Christian framework.
100%. Yeah, there is a little bit of an echo chamber, or a lot of bit of an echo chamber within a lot of this content, right? I mean, this is something that I've picked up on recently, in that you will have folks that their entire drive is to be a paranormal TV celebrity on a TV show.
Yeah.
Not to actually study the phenomenon, not to actually hear listener experiences, not to help with anything, not to read books or study of this shit. It's just to be on TV. Yeah. The rest is nothing else. They were inspired by watching Ghost Hunters, and that's what they want to be. They want to be a TV star.
They want to be a ghost bro.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I'm not one to judge. Good for them.
Good for them.
Like that's their experience. They have the right to be motivated by that type of thing, I suppose. But that's just not, these are different things.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings me to the question of, like, how do we properly, because they're in a way, right? We are commodifying these stories, right? We're taking these deeply personal experiences that have terrified or uplifted or whatever experience a person has, and we are putting them through the entertainment meat grinder until they kind of come out on the other side and, look pretty different than they might have otherwise. I don't know what kind of liberties are taken during the famous reenactment, right? Where it's like, you'll hear someone telling a story, and this is something that Miranda and I noticed so much, is like, we'll hear someone tell the story, and then the reenactment takes it way farther than the actual story that the person is telling, right? It'll be like, and then I heard a noise and the door slammed, but then it's like something way more dramatic in the retelling. That was a bad example. But, there's just, it doesn't necessarily seem like the story being told is the one that is presented through these reenactments. And I don't know if anybody has any insight or knows anything about the reenactment process, but I am so interested in how they're cast, how they're made, who directs them, what is going on with these reenactments, because they are so absolutely absurd a lot of the time. Not always, of course. They can be tastefully done, but either if you have any insight about them or if you have any opinion about what you see when you see this type of reenactment happening on these shows.
Well, I don't know anything about the process. I imagine that it's just done by the same production company. I'm trying to remember what they did for Ghost Town. I will say, though, I mean, however you feel about the reenactment happening, I mean, it really adds so much. Like when someone's telling a story and you add like any type of visual to it, I mean, it really elevates it. Like whether or not you think it was good, like when you watch it without it, yeah, you kind of need it.
I don't want it to go away. It's my favorite part. But it's just sometimes it baffles me. Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, that's the actor you chose for that person? Interesting.
I mean, I can't imagine there's like a long list of people. I've always been curious about that too, because they had to find someone who like looks like the person. Or, like looks like the people.
Close enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when they do, like when they kind of look like it, I'm like, oh my God, like good for them. I get really like excited.
And other times I'm like, wow, that person must look and be like either, or like, yeah, I do, like someone who's like way beefier than they are. And like the other day we were watching one and it was literally twins telling their story, but it was not twins who were the actors. And the two actors looked
couldn't find any. Just could not find it.
That's amazing.
I know. I was like, there's got to be a pair of blonde twins out there that are a similar build that will be on this Go show. But perhaps not. I don't know where that pool is of people who act in these shows.
They were booked somewhere, I suppose. Yeah, no, it's interesting. These are brought up in every TV pitch I'm involved in. They call them recrees.
Recrees.
Like recreation.
Yeah.
They call them recre. Like, are we going to do a recre? And sometimes they're done by like a separate production company than the non-scripted production company. Sometimes they have a partnership with a production house that either has sound stages or they have like sort of casting ready. What's interesting to me is when you're watching not even just like paranormal shows, but shows on History Channel. There's ones about people who create, candy bars and stuff, like how we built this, or I don't even know the names. Mm-hmm. But I've watched those sometimes, and it's interesting to see like some of the changes that happen when they change the recre production company. And you're like, oh wow, these are pretty good. And then you get to the next season, you're like, what happened? There's like such a drop in quality or change. And then that's when you're, kind of alerted to exactly what Sapphire was saying about how much they actually change the presentation of something and how much you're actually paying attention to those reenactments. I mean, what would like Rescue 911 or Unsolved Mysteries be without those reenactments,
A podcast, maybe. More after this. And now, back to the show. So, would you, especially Sapphire, because Jim, you have been on our show, you have shared several Euphomet stories, but Sapphire, what is like the wildest story that comes to mind for you when you were working on something like Ghost Town Terror, where you're actually hunting ghosts, so to speak? Have you had things, we see things on the show, obviously, but I'm curious what for you has been the most remarkable experience.
Oh my goodness. So I'll share stuff that happened off camera.
Ooh,
so it's a little exclusive for you.
Recreate exclusive. We're learning lots of new words.
You're welcome.
So let's see. There was one night, I believe it was season 1. We were filming pretty late. I mean, all of our nights went pretty late. But I remember driving down that like long ass road back to the main road. And I just felt really uncomfortable. And then I looked at the rear view mirror and it just like wasn't pointing how it did before. And I was like, did someone move this? And so I like moved it back. And I just had this like really uncomfortable feeling in the car. And so I like tried to call my husband to like keep me company. And then it just like wouldn't connect. And so I was like, oh, okay, let me put like music on so that I'm not just driving in silence, and it would not connect. Like I've never had an issue with this car and connecting my music before. And so I just had to drive like 30 minutes by myself down like this highway. And I was like, whatever. I might have just felt like uneasy with that after that night. I cannot remember what day it was or what investigation we did. Anyways, the next morning when we all show up to set, Tim asks me, he goes, did you feel weird driving back home? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I kind of felt like something was like in the car. And he was like, I felt that too. And then we asked Sarah and she was like, what the hell? I felt like something was in the car with me too. So like we all, for whatever reason, felt like something came back with us to the hotel that night. So that was just like a really weird thing that happened. And then there was like some nights where I had just like the wildest dreams. There was one night where I woke up and I heard like a Gregorian chant in the distance. That was really uncomfortable.
Chills.
And that's actually not the first time that's happened to me. That's happened before, which is weird.
Wow.
The night that me and Tim, we slept over in the jail.
Ooh.
And then I like had just like terrible sleep. We slept in that one because that's what we felt like was probably like the least activity, but I still felt fucking weird. And then I remember when I got back to my hotel room and I took off all my clothes to take a shower, there was like a scratch.
Oh, no.
It was like near my shoulder. And I kind of looked at it and I was like, I don't think that's anything. And then I showed Tim the next morning. He was like, what the fuck? Why didn't you say anything? So weird little things like that.
I mean, that's pretty creepy as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's intense. I mean, it must, after a period of time, you being there so consistently, having these long investigations, and, even when you're not investigating, being in a place like that with a lot of different personalities and circumstances, I mean, that must be a little bit of a head fuck, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest mind fuck of it all is just the fact that there's a reality behind the scenes. There's the reality within the show, and like trying to like balance that, like in my head being there. They say it's something like you shoot 50 hours for one episode.
Right.
So it's like there's a lot of footage that doesn't make it into an episode. So there's just like a lot of stuff that goes on that people will never see. But to a viewer, like your reality is what you see on the camera. Like for me, like knowing that I am playing the character of myself, but it isn't like I literally just like explode thinking about that. Like that's too weird. But there's all this stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And for whatever reason, oh my God, I just remembered something. Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't. Oh my God. Okay, sorry. I just remembered something.
Yes, do it,
okay.
Do it.
So, oh my gosh, this was like my favorite thing that happened. I can't believe I forgot. And this was cut from the show. I don't know why, but again, probably because it wasn't that scary. This is when I was filming season 2. I was maybe halfway through and I was just having a really bad time mentally. I mean, I was like tired. I was homesick. There was a lot of reasons. And so I was walking around the neighborhood in the morning as I usually do. And I remembered that it was my Lola's death anniversary, September 20th. And so on my walk, I sort of just started talking to her. I was like, Lola, if you could send me some type of sign that like I'm gonna make it, everything's gonna be okay, that would be great. And then I just kind of got this image of a red rose in my head. So I was like, okay, so when I see a red rose, I'll know that that's your sign, that everything will be okay. And so I kind of forgot about this. Later that night, we go to the old Montana State Prison, which is a very, very heavy, very haunted, horrifying place. And that was where we were going to do our investigation. And I believe we talk about it in the show. Our goal was to investigate a very specific cell there. It was the cell of this man named Stanley something, and he was known as the cannibal hippie, satanic hippie, something like that.
That tracks, yeah.
So, yeah, he had like eaten people, and he also was like rumored to do like dark magic types of things. So very bad reputation, and we were going to go investigate his cell. And so we were walking down the length of the cells, and Tim wanted Sarah to see if she could feel which one was his. So we were walking into each one, and Sarah was like, no, not this one, not this one. And then like at the very end of the hall, she walks into that one and immediately starts like heaving.
Whoa.
She's like, I can't be in here. And then Tim and Scott step in there, and they're like, whoa, I feel like really dizzy. Like everyone was feeling really nauseous. And this is where the show cuts the scene. It makes it look like we just left. But we did like a whole fucking thing in that room. Like I walk in and I feel fine. And part of me goes, okay, maybe it's just me not, picking up on whatever energy is here. Mm-hmm. And they're asking me like, you don't feel like throwing up? It's disgusting in here. And I was like, no, I feel fine. And then I'm looking around the room, and then my eyes fall on a drawing of a rose on the fucking wall.
Oh my God.
And here's the thing. So this place has a bunch of graffiti, right? Like every single cell had a bunch of drawings. And so I'm looking at all of them, did not see a single rose or flower in any of them. It was this particular cell that had a rose on it. And what made it like even weirder, there was like little protruding lockers on the wall. So it was drawn on the locker. And then right above the rose was a wishbone. And I didn't notice it because I was too short. And Tim saw it and he was like, wait, what? And then he like picked it up and it clearly had been there for a long time.
Like an actual physical wishbone, not a drawing.
Yes, like an actual, an actual wishbone. And he picked it up. It was just like weird because we had just been talking about how this man used bones for like his magic. And so Tim was like, oh, this is really weird. And he kept it. I don't think he should have kept it. But I never really like knew what that meant. It just felt weird that like the rose was right next to this wishbone of this like man who like used bones for magic. And then like it wasn't until like last year when I was telling one of my friends about it, and he's a curandero, I believe is what he calls himself. And when I told him that story, he was like, oh, I feel like the wishbone was also part of the message from your Lola saying that like you wished for a sign that you would be, you know, okay. And so she was like confirming that like, yes, this is what you wished for. Because the rose and the wishbone together. And I was like, oh, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Didn't make it into the show.
Wow. Oh, man. Well, it made it into this show.
Yeah.
Wow. Man. You know, hearing you talk about that is like, because largely of making American Hysteria and having to be in that skeptical mindset a lot and having to try to explain things that haven't otherwise been explained. And, you know, some of my own personal experiences that really hurt my paranormal self, you know, or my self that felt really connected to that. I mean, it hurts, man. Like hearing that story, I'm like, I used to have those kinds of experiences and I used to have this other kind of like something running under my life, you know, like this current that I don't feel connected to anymore. And I feel like, you guys, I'm ready to like get back to it. I'm like taking small steps to be like, I want to believe, you know, like, I want to be the Mulder. I want to be the Mulder a little bit more. I'm going to keep my Scully. I'm going to like Scully rising, you know, Mulder moon.
Scully rising. Oh, that's a t-shirt somewhere.
I love that.
I know, right? But it's just hearing stories like that. I want that back in my life. And it's hard to get it. I don't know how to get it back, but I think just having that intention, right, is like,
yes, that's the first step.
Yeah, we can help you with that because guess what, like you can have both of those things at the same time. You can hold that skepticism, you can be in that frame of reality, and the other part is just like a different entryway. It's just like a different consideration that also does not have to be true, but might be, right? Like, so it's just, it's an unknown, right? It's like, maybe you don't have the language or the spectrum to be able to like clearly analyze all that data to create sufficient truth in terms of 3D reality. But the quality of that feeling, the experience you're having, the mystery around that, like you will be able to find a way where you can have that all. Scully rising, you know, Mulder being present, like halfway drunk in a hotel room somewhere, obviously.
Of course.
You can have both, and we can help you get there.
I love that.
It sounds like the next incarnation of this, the three of us doing this.
Yeah.
Aww.
Definitely. And I call out to the positive spirits. Come and check me out. I'm here. I'm ready. Let's get back to it, okay?
I love it.
This was American Hysteria. In addition to calling for a ceasefire, we encourage you to check out the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, a humanitarian organization that provides medical relief and aid to conflict victims in Gaza. You can find a link in our show notes. American Hysteria is produced and edited by Miranda Zickler, and our associate producer is Riley Swedelius-Smith. Thanks as always for listening, and I hope you have a great week.